Tonight, APTN News brings you another update on SCO Grand Chief Jerry Daniels following a previous bar fight in Ottawa. After more than 2 months without a leader, the Métis National Council has named a new president.
I'm not going to run in the next election. It'll likely be in 2025.
And outgoing federal Manitoba MP Dan Vandal looks back at an almost 30-year political career. The chief of a First Nation in Manitoba is the first to release a public statement following an altercation that left the Grand Chief of the Southern Chiefs organization hospitalized. Grand Chief Jerry Daniels, now in his third term as head of this SCO, was involved in a fight outside an Ottawa bar in the early morning hours of last Tuesday. The SCO has said little but promises to issue a statement this coming Thursday. Over the weekend, Minigwaashbee Chief Derek Neepanak released a statement. He said first and foremost he is concerned about the health and well-being of Daniels. Neepanak said the First Nation has had limited participation in the SCO in recent years as they have asked for information about the Hudson's Bay building the SCO is redeveloping, among other issues. The statement says, in part, the Minigwaashbee Anishinaabe have provided notice to the SCO that we are again minimizing our participation in the organization until such time that we can be provided with adequate information about the conduct and status of the Grand Chief. Meanwhile, Daniels has disappeared from a University of Manitoba ad campaign promoting the impact of its alumni. A media relations spokesperson saying only, quote, "At this time, we have paused his portion of the campaign." The campaign has been the focus of commercials, billboards, and advertisements. The Métis National Council has a new president. The remaining members of the organization gathered in Ottawa today for annual General Assembly and elected Victoria Pruden as the new president, the second consecutive woman to hold the role. Pruden joined the MNC in May as the Senior Director of Strategic Policy. She is a citizen of the Metis Nation, British Columbia, who recently voted to withdraw from the MNC. The 40-year-old organization had been leaderless since the end of Cassidy Caron's term at the end of September. Only the Metis Nation Alberta and Metis Nation of Ontario remain members of the MNC. It is not clear how many people attended the meeting or voted. A man has been charged with life in prison in the death of Megan Gallagher, a 30-year-old mother who went missing from Saskatoon more than 4 years ago and was last seen leaving her friend's house. Her remains were found 2 years later along the South Saskatchewan River near St. Louis. A total of 9 people have been charged in connection with her death. So far, 1 had their charges stayed, 3 are already in prison, and just last Friday, 1 of her killers was sentenced. On December 6th, 29-year-old Robert James Joseph Thomas was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 18 years. Thomas was originally charged with first-degree murder but pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in October. A publication ban was imposed last month to ensure a fair trial for the 4 remaining accused who have yet to face trial. A man involved in the death of a 33-year-old man from the town of Coronach in Saskatchewan has been found and arrested in White Bear First Nation this weekend. However, a second person involved in that death is still at large. On December 3rd, Saskatchewan RCMP responded to a report of an injured person in a home in White Bear. When officers arrived, they located the body of 33-year-old Talon Lone Thunder. A search then began for 22-year-old Jeremy Whitebear, who was charged with second-degree murder, and 26-year-old Dwayne Maxey, who was charged with manslaughter. This weekend, Whitebear was found and arrested at a home in the First Nation. Maxey still remains at large. He is 6'2", about 250 pounds, and also goes by the name of Georgie. RCMP say if you see Maxey, do not approach him and call RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Whitebear made his first court appearance in Estevan today. Both Whitebear and Maxey are from the First Nation. It's located about 215 kilometers southeast of Regina. This past weekend, Saskatchewan RCMP Major Crimes Unit investigated a homicide in the Onion Lake Cree Nation. RCMP are now asking for the public's help in solving the case. At around 6 a.m. on Friday, December 6th, Onion Lake RCMP responded to reports of gunshots. RCMP later learned a man with serious injuries was brought to the Onion Lake Medical Center. 37-year-old Jesse Heathen was pronounced dead by emergency medical services. RCMP now consider his death a homicide. Anyone with information or who saw suspicious activity in the Cree Nation is asked to contact RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Manitoba RCMP are also asking the public's help to solve a recent homicide in the St. Teresa Point First Nation. On Saturday, December 7th at around 7:40 a.m., Island Lake RCMP received a report of a suspicious death. A male was transported to the St. Teresa Point First Nation nursing station with life-threatening injuries where he later died. RCMP say the man was a 25-year-old man from St. Teresa Point First Nation. RCMP are now asking if anyone has information on this death to come forward and call RCMP or Crime Stoppers. An elderly couple from Pelican Narrows in northeast Saskatchewan has received assistance after APTN News reported they were in need of help late last week. Last Friday, APTN News told you about the story of 75-year-old Marianne and Gordon Ballantyne. They were trying to stay warm while living in a camper trailer while also helping to look after their 19 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The couple lost their home to a house fire last summer, and Michaela Renas, the granddaughter, contacted APTN News to speak on their behalf. Following that report, the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation said it made numerous attempts to help the couple, but they both preferred to live in their trailer close to home. Now, Renas tells us her grandparents have accepted the latest offer to stay in a temporary home nearby. To read more about this story, you can go to aptnnews.ca. There has been an ongoing heated battle in BC over open net fish farming. That story when we come back. Welcome back. The province of British Columbia is considering a proposed mine in northwestern BC. But as Sarah Connors tells us, Southeast Alaskan tribal groups on the other side of the US-Canadian border fear they'll ultimately be the ones paying for the environmental cost of the mine.
The Taku River watershed is a special place for Indigenous people in northwestern BC and Southeast Alaska. The Transboundary River runs from northwest British Columbia to the Taku Inlet, about 40 kilometers east of Juneau, Alaska. It's revered by Indigenous people on both sides of the border as a top salmon-producing river.
The Taku Kwan, the people of the Taku, have, subsisted and survived and stewarded the Taku River watershed for thousands of years.
But Southeast Alaskan tribal groups say a proposed mine could harm the watershed and the wildlife that depend on it.
It's such a magical place that to even think about activity like that for those of us downstream, it's kind of mind-boggling for sure.
CanaGold's new Polaris project is located 60 kilometers northeast of Juneau and 100 kilometers south of Atlan, BC, on the traditional territory of the Taku River Tlingit. The underground gold mine will have capacity to produce around 1,000 tons of ore per day. The province of BC recently gave the project the green light to proceed to the next phase in the environmental assessment stage.
Mining in Canada is just notoriously under-regulated.
The mine raises many concerns for this Southeast Alaskan tribal organization. For instance, CanaGold is proposing to build an airstrip adjacent to one of the most ecologically sensitive wetlands in the Taku watershed.
It's a salmon hatchery, it's a migratory bird stopover, feeding place, moose, everything is there.
The project will also be located near the abandoned Tulsaquah Chief Mine. The province has committed to cleaning up the site, which has been releasing acidic water into the surrounding environment for close to 7 decades. But Alaskan tribal groups feel the mine shouldn't be considered until the pollution from Tulsaquah Chief is properly dealt with.
Chief, they're pushing this ahead when they, again, have not yet been able to reclaim and close that site.
The Taku River Tlingit, Canagold, and the province of BC declined to comment. According to BC's Environmental Assessment Office, the Alaskan tribal group's concerns will be discussed in the future if the project proceeds. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
A heated battle between opposing sides to the open net fish farm debate is erupting on the West Coast. APTN's Tina House has more on this story.
Last June, the federal government announced the closure of open net fish farms in BC.
The open net farms will be fully terminated in terms of operations within 5 years.
The news came as a welcome gesture from the Wild Salmon Alliance that have been fighting to shut down these farms from what they say is contamination to wild salmon stocks.
When the Wild Salmon Alliance began to inform First Nations of the rationale for being supportive of the removal, it's based upon fact. It's based upon federal court rulings, the Auditor General's reporting, on the Cohen Commission's report, on the Standing Committee of Fisheries and Oceans, and most recently the judicial review that came out on the Discovery Islands decisions.
But on November the 28th, tensions boiled over at a press conference in Ottawa, where the First Nations for Fin Fish Stewardship and their allies were there to demand the government reconsider their decision to shut down open net fish farms.
They're listening to activists and ministers like Jonathan Wilkinson who are continuing to interfere with our rights and self-determination. There's a difference between activists and conservationists. First Nations have rights and title, and they work with conservation community to protect valuable lands and resources within our territories. Activists simply point out problems that exist.
17 hereditary chiefs immediately held their own press conference in Vancouver to respond to those remarks.
This is not true. In the Broughton Archipelago, many of the hereditary chiefs that are standing with me today were the ones that made the decision to remove the farms from our traditional waters. To characterize them as activists is completely and utterly offensive. You see, today there are coppers with our hereditary chiefs. They have fulfilled their obligations in the culture of our people to stand up and look after our territories for generations to come.
Dallas Smith spoke to APTN by Zoom.
To be called out in a press conference by chiefs who all have my cell phone number, who drove past my office on the way to Vancouver to have said press conference, is really a dangerous precedent. You know, it's really important that we look at all these issues and understand the role of hereditary leadership on a community by community basis. But to sit here and call each other out personally is just not really going to be beneficial of good results.
Smith also states that over 5,000 people depend on the aquaculture sector and is concerned that his communities do not have the power to sustain land-based operations. However, the federal government is still moving ahead with full closure of open net fish farms by 2029. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
After almost 3 decades, MP Dan Vandal is calling it a career. That story when we're back in less than 3 minutes. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Dave Menzies stopped to capture these sundogs as seen over the city of Steinbach, Manitoba. Thanks so much, Dave, for sharing with all of us and our viewers. For the chance to be our next photo of the day, send your photos to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east, sunny in St. John's at -1, Charlottetown 0. The Grand River -9, and Unjuak -7. Saguenay 0, Val-d'Or 3. Peterborough 6, Sault Ste. Marie -5. Sioux Lookout -12, Big Trout Lake -15. -17 in Churchill, Thompson -23. -10 in Gimli, Princess Harbor -20. North Battleford -16, Saskatoon -19. Stony Rapids -21, Uranium City -23. -22 in Fort Chipewyan, Peace River -9. Medicine Hat -5, Lethbridge -2. Penticton 0, Vancouver 6. Smithers -2, Dease Lake -7. Watson Lake -17, Mayo -12. -24 in Wati, Wrigley -13. -14 in Pawlatuck, Tuktoyaktuk -13. Baker Lake -24, Whale Cove -12. And Clyde River -23, Agulik -12. Southern Ontario is in for some slippery conditions with a freezing rain warning in effect across the Greater Toronto Area. Forecasters predict the freezing rain could lead to ice buildup of 2 to 4 millimeters. The precipitation is expected to taper into scattered flurries or freezing drizzle into the evening and overnight, as temperatures are expected to linger around near freezing mark. All that extra precipitation, however, has made going to and from work a disaster for many. Meanwhile, Manitobans were busy shoveling out after a heavy snowfall wall opened in the southern part of the province. Dan Vandal is a familiar face in Canadian politics with a long career in public service. In October, he announced he plans to retire in 2025. Vandal has been the MP for St. Boniface St. Vidal since 2015 and is also the Minister of Economic Development for both the Prairies and the North. Before this, he was on Winnipeg City Council. He recently joined T.R. Whately at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights to talk about his early days as a mentor and foster care worker, his boxing stint, growing up Métis, and the spark that led to his 30-year political career.
You recently said you're not running again. Let's start the conversation there.
Yes. Well, I decided that I'm not going to run in the next election. It'll likely be in 2025, which will make 30 years since I was first elected. I was first elected in 1995 as a city councillor in St. Boniface, St. Vital, that way. Before, I ran for mayor and I came in second. So I was away for almost 2.5 years. I came back in 2007 and I was a councillor again till 2014. I realized I really wanted to lean in to Indigenous issues, infrastructure issues, the environment, and I realized the federal government is the place to do that.
Back then, we were just starting the conversation of reconciliation, a whole different picture. Let's talk about some of the what you've seen at the federal level in 10 years.
I saw a huge change. I remember in 2014, Aboriginal missing inquiry. Are we going to have one? Are we not going to have one? Stephen Harper said it's not on his radar, not a priority. We committed to have one right away. Very proud of the work we've done. We've literally invested billions of dollars in housing, in education, in health care all over this vast country. I'm really proud of our Crown Indigenous tables that we've had for a long time. Where we sit down with Inuit leadership, with Métis leadership, with First Nation leadership, with the many cabinet ministers and the Prime Minister once a year, Indigenous Governor General, Indigenous Supreme Court Judge. We've done some really good things. It's not perfect, a lot of work to do.
You were on City Council. Just talk about your time there at City Council and the things you've seen there and that changed while you were there.
In those days, early on, municipalities didn't really invest in Indigenous issues. It was seen as more of a federal thing or a provincial initiative. And we were able to work with our administration, with Mayor Glenn Murray at the time, to put an Aboriginal youth strategy together where we knew that we were going to need a lot more workers in the next 20 years. And Indigenous young people were the fastest growing demographic.
And you worked at Mama Way, so you were even working in community. Let's talk about some of your service within the Indigenous community.
I was a youth worker in '86. My job was to meet and become a big brother type of work with young Indigenous people. Spend time with them, group activities, but also one-on-one time We used to go to boxing clubs a lot, actually, because I was a former boxer. When I boxed, I had some success. I traveled to different parts of North America with other people, and I realized I didn't know anything about how the world operated. I didn't know anything about politics. I quit after 25 years old, almost instinctively. I just said, that's enough for me, I'm going to get hurt. And I focused on getting a real job at Mumaway. I'm glad they were there for me.
Is that kind of where your political career started?
I actually got awakened during the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry in Manitoba here. And Murray Sinclair was a co-commissioner with Alvin Hamilton, and it just looked deeply at the racism inside the Winnipeg Police Service, the Manitoba justice system, and it was really eye-opening. And it was on TV every day. I remember watching it every day. I went back to school after that for 4 years. I got a social work degree, and I went back to Mumaway, and I worked as an Azosanon foster care worker. Mm-hmm. And I'm giving you a very long story, very short here. I did run, and I got 10 good people to help me, and we knocked on a lot of doors. We did some fundraising. We did a lot of fun stuff, and I ended up winning. I wasn't supposed to win, but I did, and that was in 1995. I've had about 9 elections. I've won 8. I lost the mayoralty election in 2004. I never did get a rematch. I think I could have won the rematch, but it was a good experience. It was fun.
It was also back in a time when, again, Indigenous people weren't seen as, I mean, in our community, we've always known we're leaders.
Yeah.
But in the mainstream Canada, like Winnipeg almost wasn't ready for it yet.
Oh, this was way before the Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, and things had to change. Slowly they have. I think we've made progress. Again, it'll never be perfect, but there's been progress made, and I think we're on a long journey of reconciliation.
Since we're talking about racism, as a Métis man yourself growing up in this city, you must have experienced your own. I
come from a Métis background where it was not very popular to be Métis. In fact, you would get intimidated and violence upon you, and you get killed sometimes. That whole Métis history, where our people started on that side of the river in St. Boniface along the Red River and were slowly dispersed to Saskatchewan, Batoche, all the way up to Northwest Territories. You've also done time on different boards and stuff before you were minister. You were on APTN's board. I was APTN for 5 years, and that was a great experience. Broadcasting, communications, arts, culture is so powerful, and if we're to improve lives of our people, that's going to be one of the main ways we do it, by telling our own stories. History would have been different if APTN was around 150 years ago. Métis people know how to do the Red River Jig. You going to do that for me? No, I'm not much of a jigger, and I don't have the right shoes, and there's carpet, so next time. Yes, thank you so much for today. Yes. Thank you.
That's a good ending there, TR. Thanks for that. And that's your evening newscast for this Monday, December 9th. We're back again tomorrow for your daytime newscast. Make sure to join us then. From everyone at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. Akse.